I never thought my life would take such a brutal, unexpected turn when I was just a kid, knee-deep in the fields behind our weathered old house. My father always preached that hard work was the foundation of a good life, and back then, I clung to those words like they were gospel. My childhood smelled of freshly tilled earth, buzzed with the hum of cicadas, and moved to the slow, predictable rhythm of a small town where dreams rarely stretched beyond the horizon. But life has a cruel way of tearing apart naive beliefs. My older brother, Lucas, was the one everyone admired, the golden child, the athlete, the charmer with a talent for always landing on his feet. Me? I was the quiet one, the kid who spent more time in the shed than anywhere else, lost in the world of gears and blueprints. Lucas never let me forget how ridiculous he thought my ideas were, but I kept going, stubborn as ever. Our family business, Reynolds Incorporated, was built by my grandfather, a modest tool manufacturing company that had scraped by for decades. The moment I was old enough to hold a wrench, I was expected to pull my weight. By the time I hit my 20s, I had developed a drilling mechanism that changed the game. My patents turned the company into something bigger than my grandfather ever dreamed of, but it was Lucas who got the recognition. My parents barely acknowledged my contributions. Lucas was the one they saw, the future of the company, while I was just the strange, obsessive one who worked too much. Then Vanessa came along, sharp, striking, impossible to ignore. She had this effortless confidence, the kind that drew people in, and for reasons I never fully understood, she chose me. I thought I had it all, a wife who loved me, a thriving career, 2 incredible kids. But Lucas was always lurking, waiting. I didn't see the signs, not until it was too late. The betrayal wasn't just about the affair, it was the cold, deliberate way they orchestrated it. Lucas didn't just take my wife. He took my company, manipulating everything so that when the dust settled, I had nothing left. The day I walked in on them together was the day my world collapsed. And my parents? They sided with Lucas, as if I was overreacting, as if I was the one causing trouble. Let it go, they said. Think about the bigger picture. How do you let go of everything? You don't. So I walked away. From Vanessa, from Lucas, from my family, from the wreckage of the life I had built. Starting over wasn't easy. I used what was left of my patents to open a small garage, pouring every ounce of energy into my work. It was the only thing that made sense. And in that quiet, oil-stained space, I started to heal. Then Sierra came along, steady, unshaken, someone who didn't flinch at my past. With her, I found something different, something real. But the past never stays buried. I was under the hood of my car, elbow deep in grease, when the sharp click of heels on concrete broke my focus. A scent drifted in before I even saw her. Vanessa's perfume. Too sweet, too familiar. You're hard to find, she said, her voice smooth, practiced. I didn't look up. Sounds like a you problem. She let out a breath, slow and deliberate. So this is your life now. I glanced around at the cluttered workbench, the oil-streaked floor. What were you expecting? A penthouse? A butler? I slammed the hood shut, wiped my hands on a rag, then poured 2 cups of coffee from my old thermos. I didn't know her kindness, but I wasn't raised to be rude. Here, I said, handing her a cup. She took it gingerly, her expression unreadable. I was hoping we could talk. You, me, and Lucas. That stopped me cold. You think I'd willingly sit in the same room as him? She sighed, as if I was the difficult one. We could be civil. Have a real conversation. I laughed dryly. Civil? I'd rather have my teeth pulled. She rolled her eyes. You know what he is, Ethan. We both need to move on. Move on. I scoffed. He stole my wife, my company, and left me with nothing. And now you expect me to just let that slide? Her lips pressed together. Why sink to his level? I smirked. That's rich, coming from you. Her face paled. You knew? I took a slow sip of coffee, dragging out the silence. Of course I knew. You really thought I wouldn't notice? She shifted, fiddling with the hem of her skirt. I didn't come here to fight, she murmured. You disappeared. No note. No explanation. I leaned against the car, crossing my arms. What was there to explain? I left. A note wouldn't have changed anything. She hesitated, but I wasn't done. Actually, I did consider leaving one. Dear Vanessa, you're a cheating liar. Have a miserable life. Bye. But even that felt like a waste of time. Her face twisted with anger. I was never a thief. I chuckled, dark and low. Not denying the rest, though. She went silent, which was answer enough. You and Lucas celebrated while I was drowning in whiskey. I continued, my voice sharp. While I was trying to figure out how to rebuild my life, you were busy playing house with him. She flinched, but said nothing. When I caught you, a better man might have thrown punches. But I just stood there, feeling the ground vanish beneath me. So I walked away. Because you weren't worth it. She swallowed, voice quiet. Ethan, I cut her off. Tell me this. Why do you and that snake still own the company I built? Her face reddened. That wasn't me. It was your parents. They said it was best for the company. A bitter laugh escaped me. Best for business? No, it was best for Lucas, your lover. My parents knew, and they didn't care. Hell, they closed ranks around him while I got shoved aside. Vanessa stiffened, straightening as if trying to regain control. I didn't come here to rehash the past, she said, her tone clipped. I crossed my arms, keeping my voice steady and cold. No? Then why bring it up? You show up here like I owe you something, dragging all of this back as if nothing happened. So, if it's not about the past, what do you want? Her face remained carefully neutral, her tone deliberately casual. It's about Nathan and Isabella. My jaw clenched. What about them? They miss you. Her voice softened slightly, though she kept her stance firm. Your kids miss you. They know where to find me. Her gaze swept around the garage, barely hiding her disapproval. Clearly, this wasn't the life she wanted them exposed to. They need more stability, she pressed, her words sounding more rehearsed now. If you can't give them the life they deserve, we need to find another way. I raised an eyebrow. And what's this other way? She hesitated, just for a second, then rushed it out. We were thinking Lucas could adopt them. I froze. What? He's there for them every day. Together, he and I provide what they need, she explained, as if this was all perfectly reasonable. This is about the kids, not us. I just want what's best for them. I leaned against the workbench, studying her. What grade did Isabella get in math last term? She blinked, caught off guard. What? You heard me. You're their mother, right? So involved, so devoted. I figured you'd know. She faltered, then waved a hand dismissively. Their schooling isn't the point. They're doing fine. No, I said. They're smart kids. They'll get by? But that's not what you meant, is it? She exhaled sharply. I just think they'd be better off if Lucas adopted them. He can take over the tedious parts of raising them. Tedious. My fists clenched, but I kept my voice even. You've got some nerve, Vanessa. Talking about our kids like there's some burden you can offload. Like I'm just a roadblock in your perfect little life with Lucas. Her face tightened, but I wasn't interested in her excuses. She could dress this up however she liked. I saw the truth. She wanted my kids out of my hands. Lucas is a respectable, successful man, she said sharply. He's a fine role model. And you? Let's face it, you've got nothing. You were nothing. She said it like a fact, like it was something I was supposed to accept. Lucas wants to help, she continued, voice firm. I even brought a check. $5,000. Take it, get back on your feet, and give your kids a real shot at life. I leaned back against the workbench, crossing my arms. Generous offer, I said slowly, letting the words settle. Then I leaned in slightly. But I'm not selling my kids. Her hands curled into fists. This isn't about that, she snapped. I'm trying to do what's best for Nathan and Isabella. You could at least think about their future. I let out a slow, bitter breath. Their future, huh? Funny how you and Lucas only care about it when it suits you. I shook my head. Their future's better with a father who loves them for who they are. Not as props for your perfect little picture. She opened her mouth, but I lifted a hand, stopping her. Don't bother, Vanessa. I know exactly where I stand with you and Lucas. Keep your damn check. And tell him if he thinks he can buy my kids, he's dead wrong. Just as I turned to pour another cup of coffee, the door swung open. A man in a sleek black suit stepped inside, standing out against the grease-streaked walls like he had wandered into the wrong world. His polished shoes didn't have a speck of dust on them. Mr. Reynolds, he said with a respectful nod. The Prime Minister of Japan is on the line, awaiting your response regarding the Osaka project. I barely spared Vanessa a glance, but out of the corner of my eye, I caught her face shifting from anger to sheer confusion. Turning back to the suited man, I nodded. Bring it over. He handed me a high-tech phone. Casually, I leaned against the workbench as I answered. Prime Minister Takahashi, I greeted warmly. Always a pleasure. Vanessa didn't move. I continued, my voice steady, professional. I've reviewed the proposal, and while we're aligned, I need to ensure our sustainability commitments remain firm. That's non-negotiable. As the Prime Minister responded, respectful and accommodating, I watched Vanessa out of the corner of my eye. Her face was unreadable, but she shifted awkwardly, clearly blindsided. Excellent, I said after a moment. We're in agreement. My team will finalize the details. Thank you for your trust. I look forward to this partnership. I ended the call, handing the phone back to the suited man, who gave a brief nod before stepping out. Before Vanessa could fully process what had just happened, another man entered, clipboard in hand, businesslike and efficient. Mr. Reynolds, we need your signature to close the $20 million land purchase. It's set to finalize today. I took the clipboard, scanning the documents before signing. Make sure the architects know I want something iconic for the groundbreaking, I said smoothly. We're setting the standard. Understood, sir. The man nodded and left. Vanessa stood frozen, disbelief written all over her face. You, she murmured, like she had just discovered I wasn't the man she thought she had left behind. I shrugged, turning back to my workbench. Guess there's a lot you didn't know, Vanessa. Life's funny like that. The sharp click of heels echoed through the garage, drawing my attention toward the entrance. Vanessa turned, her brow furrowing as the woman stepped in. She was striking, athletic, confident, wearing a sleek leather jacket over fitted jeans, moving with effortless grace. Before I could get a word out, she strode over, cupped my face, and kissed me. It wasn't a delicate kiss or some hesitant greeting. It was a statement, a declaration. When she pulled back, her smirk was sharp, cutting, and aimed directly at Vanessa. Buying a whole garage just to play with your cars? She teased, nudging my shoulder. Bit excessive, don't you think? Then she turned, giving Vanessa a slow once-over, unimpressed. So this is your ex? Didn't you say she was good-looking? This. She waved a hand dismissively. She looks like a malnourished Shrek minus the green. Vanessa's face burned red. Excuse me, she hissed. Is this Sierra Novak, the MMA champion? How the hell did someone like you end up with her? Sierra's smirk vanished. She took a step closer, her voice dropping to an icy, measured tone. Watch yourself, she said smoothly. Normally, I'd knock someone out for that. But for Ethan's sake, I'll let it slide, this time. Her eyes darkened. Next time, I won't be so forgiving. She tilted her head, letting the weight of her words settle. And for the record, he didn't trap me. I chased him. Vanessa took a step back, her confidence faltering. Sierra turned to me, brushing a stray hair from my shoulder. You good, babe? Or should I handle this? I chuckled, shaking my head. You've made your point. Let's not scare her too much. Vanessa opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She looked between us, rattled, trying to process the man I had become and the powerhouse standing at my side. Leaning against my desk, I folded my arms and smirked. Shocking, huh? But honestly, you cheating with my brother? Best thing that ever happened to me. Her face tightened, but she didn't argue. I pressed on, voice calm but razor sharp. The day I caught you, that was just bad luck for you. Came home early, saw you rolling around with that maggot in my bed. Didn't even touch him. Didn't even touch you. Just walked out. I exhaled, shaking my head. Still, I thought my parents would back me up. Thought maybe, just maybe, they'd care. I let out a bitter chuckle as the memory resurfaced, the cold indifference of that night. You know what my dad said when I told him? He just sighed and said, "These things happen, son. Don't make a scene." My fists clenched as I mimicked the dismissive tone. Like it was a minor inconvenience, like it was just business. Vanessa flinched, but I wasn't done. And my mother? I continued, voice sharp. She just wrung her hands and said, "It's best to let it go." Like my life, my trust, none of it mattered. I leaned forward, my voice dropping. I wanted answers. Justice. Something. My fingers curled into fists at the memory. You know what my father said? We have a reputation to protect. Let her go and move on. I let out a low, humorless laugh. Move on. I repeated. Like I should just erase it all. Pretend I didn't walk in on my wife screwing my brother? Like none of it meant anything. Vanessa's lips parted like she wanted to argue, but she had nothing to say. She shifted, hands fidgeting in her lap. For the first time, she wasn't playing the role of the icy, composed ex-wife. She was just a woman caught in the weight of something she never fully understood. You don't get to defend them, I said, my tone colder now. You can't rewrite history. They didn't care about me. I was just the son they tolerated, the one they could throw away when it suited them. Lucas? He was their golden boy. He could do no wrong. Her shoulders slumped, all that forced confidence draining away. So yeah, I continued, my voice steady but sharp. The choice was easy. Stay and let them destroy me, or leave. Leave you, leave them, leave everything. I exhaled, shaking my head. If I'd stayed, nothing would have changed. My brother would have done it again. And again. It's what he does. Silence hung between us, heavy and suffocating. Her eyes shimmered slightly, but she didn't cry. I broke the cycle, I said, watching her carefully. Walking away was the best decision I ever made. I don't live in their shadow anymore. I met her gaze, my smirk returning. I'm free. She swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't know it hurt you that much. You didn't think at all, Vanessa, I shot back. Not about me. Not about us. You were too busy chasing after him, like everyone else. I leaned back, arms crossed. I'm done explaining myself. I don't need your understanding. I don't need you. Her mouth opened slightly, as if she wanted to argue, but she stayed silent. The weight of the truth settled over her, and for the first time, I saw real understanding flicker in her eyes. I smirked. My family always thought I was expendable, I said, my voice dipping into something venomous. The son they could push aside to keep their golden boy happy. Her hands twitched at her sides, but she didn't speak. They made one mistake, I added, my tone cutting. They didn't realize I wasn't just the black sheep. I was the smart one. The one who owned the patents that made Reynolds Incorporated what it is. Her eyes widened slightly. There it was, the realization creeping in. Oh, you didn't know? I drawled, tilting my head mockingly. While you and Lucas were busy playing house, I was working, designing, filing patents under my name. Every wrench, drill, and custom tool that put Reynolds on the map? That was me. Vanessa's jaw tightened, but she remained silent. I leaned in, letting the truth sink in. When I left, I didn't leave empty-handed. I took the licenses with me. Her breath hitched slightly. You, what? I grinned, slow and deliberate. And you know what I did? She shook her head faintly, her curiosity betraying her silence. I started my own company, I said, voice rich with satisfaction. And not with a bank loan. I leaned back, arms resting casually on the desk. My partner had, let's just say, unconventional resources. Her brow furrowed. What are you talking about? I smirked, enjoying this moment far too much. A Mexican cartel boss. Vanessa blanched, her mouth opening and closing as she processed that. He needed to clean his money, I said lazily. And I needed capital. Win-win. You worked with. He's legitimate now, I cut in, waving her off. But back then? His investment built my empire. Her stunned silence was the sweetest victory yet. And now, I continued smoothly, watching Vanessa's face drain of color. Reynolds Incorporated licenses my tools and pays me royalties. I leaned in slightly, savoring the moment. Every single month. Her hands trembled as she processed my words. You planned all of this? She whispered. I chuckled, shaking my head. Planned? No. I survived. I played the cards I was dealt. And I played them better than anyone ever expected. I leaned back, arms crossed, watching as Vanessa's jaw dropped. She opened her mouth, but no words came. I gave her a moment, letting it all sink in, then twisted the knife deeper. 2 years ago, I said casually, I pulled all the licenses. Her lips parted in shock. What? Since then, Reynolds Incorporated has been sinking fast, I continued, my voice almost bored. But why? She asked, barely above a whisper. A humorless laugh escaped me. Why? Because they deserved it. Lucas took everything, my wife, my dignity, my future. My parents covered for him, sacrificed me to keep their golden boy on top. So I made sure they paid for it. Her fingers curled around the chair, knuckles turning white as she put the pieces together. With backing from my unconventional partner and the patents I owned, I started poaching their clients, I went on. One by one. It wasn't even hard. Quality sells itself. And Lucas? He's all charm, no substance. The man couldn't run a lemonade stand, let alone a business. I leaned forward, my voice laced with disdain. While he played CEO, I built something real. Every contract they lost came to me. Now, Reynolds Incorporated is drowning in debt, circling bankruptcy. Lucas ran it into the ground with his own arrogance. Her face twisted in a mix of shock and fear. You destroyed them, she murmured. I scoffed. They destroyed themselves the moment they chose Lucas over me. I just gave them the rope to hang themselves with. Her voice wavered. And you think this makes you better than them? I met her gaze, my expression unflinching. I don't care what it makes me. Better, worse, it doesn't matter. What matters is that I'm free. They lost everything. And I won. Her eyes filled with unshed tears. I didn't know you hated us that much, she whispered. I shook my head. Hate? No, Vanessa. Hate takes too much effort. I don't even care enough to hate you. You, Lucas, my parents, you're just ghosts of a life I walked away from. I smirked, watching her struggle to process it all. My family always thought I was expendable, I said coolly. The son they could ignore and discard. But they missed one thing. I let my smirk widen. I wasn't just the black sheep. I was the smart one. Her eyes widened, realization dawning. You? She breathed. Yep, I said, cutting her off. And when I left, I took the licenses with me. Then I built my own company. With some unconventional funding. Her brow furrowed. What do you mean? I leaned in slightly. A retired Mexican cartel boss, I said smoothly. She paled, mouth opening and closing. You worked with. Relax, I interrupted, waving her off. It's all legitimate now. And as for Reynolds's Incorporated? I smirked. They still license my tools. Every month, they pay me. Every single month. Vanessa swallowed hard, her voice barely audible. You planned all of this? I chuckled darkly. No, Vanessa. I adapted. I played the cards I had. And I played them better than anyone expected. I let the silence stretch, watching her squirm before delivering the final blow. Now, let's talk about the kids. Her lips twitched like she wanted to argue, but I raised a hand, cutting her off. Don't interrupt. You'll want to hear this. I leaned forward. The school they attend? The one you brag about? I paused, watching her face tighten. It gets a hefty annual donation from me. Her eyes widened as realization dawned, but she said nothing. That's right, I continued, my voice calm. Every A on their report cards? Every project they aced? That was me. I've been there, Vanessa. Guiding them. Supporting them. Making sure they had what they needed. I let my smirk return. And you? You didn't even notice. Her face flushed with a mix of anger and shock, but I didn't let up. They trust me, I went on, voice deliberate. They confide in me. Their dreams. Their fears. Their struggles. I paused, letting her feel the weight of it. And soon, they'll be here with me. Permanently. Her breath hitched. This isn't just about being part of their lives, I said, watching her crumble. It's about giving them a home. A place where they truly belong. She trembled slightly. You thought I was nothing, I said, my voice smooth. Just an ant you could step on. I tilted my head, watching her squirm. But the ant survived the storm. I let my smirk widen. And this time, the ant had the last laugh. Vanessa's face went pale as she shook her head faintly, like she couldn't, or wouldn't, accept it. You assumed I vanished, I continued, my tone sharp. Thought I abandoned them, just like I abandoned you. I let out a slow exhale. But here's the truth, Vanessa. I stepped closer, letting the air between us thicken. All this time, I've been building something. A connection with them that you can't destroy, no matter how hard you try. Her lips parted, but I wasn't finished. So go ahead, I said coolly. Play your games. Cling to whatever illusion of control you think you still have. It won't matter. Because soon, I'll be the one in charge. And they'll be calling this place home. I let the silence linger. For the first time, she had no moves left. She could scheme. She could manipulate. But the truth was out. And she was powerless. While you were making decisions about their future without me, I continued sharply, I was actually creating one. One where they're nurtured, guided, given real support. Not left in the hands of people too blinded by their own egos to see the damage they're causing. A bitter chuckle escaped me as I shook my head. Look at yourself, Vanessa. All dressed up, playing trophy wife to Lucas. Does he make you feel important? Special? She stiffened, but I didn't give her a chance to answer. I scoffed, waving her off. Because from where I stand, you're nothing more than an accessory. A pawn to prop up his fragile ego while he hides the fact that he's barely keeping his head above water. Her jaw clenched, eyes flashing with defiance. But I saw it. The cracks were showing. Lucas wasn't winning anymore. The debt. I continued smoothly, letting the words sink in. It's piling up faster than he can count. The lies? They're closing in on him. The IRS and federal investigators. I leaned forward slightly. They're circling. It's not a matter of if. It's when. Vanessa's lips parted, her expression caught between fury and disbelief, but I didn't give her the chance to speak. You can't pretend to be a king while living on borrowed time, I added. The collapse is inevitable. She inhaled sharply, as if steeling herself for a rebuttal. But before she could summon a defense, I cut her off. You want to know what's really ironic? I mused, my tone calm, almost amused. Even the bank has been in on this mess. They've known about the shady deals, the misused funds, the endless deception. And yet, they kept giving him money. Her breath hitched. Why? She whispered. A slow smirk crept across my face. Because their new majority shareholder had a plan. Her hands gripped the chair, knuckles turning white. Every loan, every extension, every so-called favor, I continued, my voice laced with venom, was part of a strategy. A rope Lucas has been tightening around his own neck. Her eyes widened, panic flickering through them as realization took hold. But I wasn't done. And here's the best part, I added, leaning back with an icy grin. He's so arrogant, so deluded, he doesn't even see it coming. While he's strutting around, pretending he's untouchable, the walls are closing in. Silence thickened between us, heavy and suffocating. Vanessa stared at me, the confidence she had clung to cracking before my eyes. For the first time, she truly understood the weight of what I was saying. I leaned in, locking eyes with her. And the real kicker? My voice dropped to a low, steady tone. I'm that majority shareholder. She stiffened, mouth slightly open, her world spinning. I'm the one pulling every string, orchestrating every downfall, I continued smoothly. By the time you make it back to that so-called home of yours, there won't be one left. Her breath hitched. The bank is repossessing it as we speak, I said, letting the final blow land. Your golden dream, the family name, the prestige, the legacy, it's all gone. Vanessa sat frozen, her lips moving as though she wanted to argue, but no words came. I let the silence stretch, savoring her unraveling. Surprised? I asked, my tone sharp. You shouldn't be. This didn't happen overnight. While Lucas was parading his false success, I was making sure every domino was perfectly aligned. I met her gaze, unwavering. And now? They're all falling. She swallowed hard, her hands restless in her lap, grasping a control she no longer had. Oh, and about my parents? I said casually, watching her twitch. Their house? Repossessed too. A hollow look crossed her face. Funny how the tables turn, I continued. They'll be joining you and Lucas soon enough. Not that it's his biggest problem, he still has to figure out how to fix everything. I tilted my head slightly. That is, unless he's arrested first. Her jaw clenched. Do you see it now, Vanessa? I said, my voice quieter but sharper than ever. The world isn't playing by Lucas's rules anymore. He won't just lose everything, he'll be scrambling, just like the rest of you. I exhaled slowly, letting the weight of my words settle. So sit back and enjoy the fireworks. It's about to get very, very ugly. Vanessa's expression was tight, her breathing uneven, her mind racing to deny what she knew was true. But she had nothing. No retort. No smug comebacks. Just silence. You're bluffing, Ethan, she finally spat, her voice tight with defiance. This is just another one of your games. You don't have the power you think you do. She shot me a scornful glare, turned sharply on her heel, and stormed out, her heels striking the cold concrete with force. Even as she walked away, her shoulders stiff with forced confidence, I knew the reality was already sinking in. She wouldn't let me see her falter. Not now. Not ever. But as she drove home, that confidence, the arrogance she had always worn so well, began to crack. The house loomed ahead, dark and unfeeling, its presence no longer reassuring. It stood there, not as a symbol of success, but as a monument to impending ruin. Her heart pounded as she pulled into the driveway, unease curling in her stomach. Something was wrong. Then she saw it. Pinned to the doorframe, glaring in bold black letters, was an official notice. Her pulse spiked as she stepped closer, breath catching as the words hit her like a sledgehammer. Repossession notice. The letters blurred as her mind reeled. This wasn't some idle threat. Ethan hadn't been bluffing. It was real. Her hands trembled as she reached for the door, her knees threatening to give out beneath her. Everything she had worked for, everything she had built, was gone. The world around her faded. The distant hum of cars, the wind rustling through the trees, it all became background noise. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. Ma'am. A voice broke through the haze, snapping her back to the present. A man stood beside her, his expression detached, professional. I'll need the keys, he said simply. Her lips parted. They're the keys. Yes, ma'am, he confirmed, his tone impassive. The car is being repossessed as well. He extended his hand, waiting. A wave of nausea hit her, the air suddenly too thick to breathe. Her fingers fumbled through her purse, movements clumsy, as if her body was rejecting the very act of surrender. Finally, the key slipped from her trembling grasp into his waiting palm. The sound of metal clinking against his hand felt like a death knell. She stood frozen as he turned, walking away with the last remnants of her stability. Then, as the car disappeared down the street, her legs gave out. She collapsed onto the cold concrete driveway, hot tears streaking down her face, unstoppable and relentless. Everything, her home, her security, the carefully crafted image she had spent years perfecting, was gone. The suffocating weight of helplessness clawed at her chest, her breath coming in short, broken gasps. Her hands scrambled for her phone, fingers shaking violently as she dialed the only person who could fix this. Lucas. The phone rang. Once. Twice. Again. Each unanswered tone twisted deeper into Vanessa's chest like a dull blade. Then, his voicemail. Cold. Distant. She redialed, desperation clawing at her insides. Straight to voicemail. Again. On the third attempt, the call cut off abruptly. His phone was off. No explanation. No response. She sat there, the weight of abandonment crushing her. Lucas wasn't coming to her rescue. No one was. The car was gone. The house wasn't hers. Everything, the last remnants of the world she had built, was slipping through her fingers. Sobs ripped through her as she collapsed onto the pavement, her mind spinning with memories of everything she had fought to protect, everything she had now lost. She had never cried like this before, not in front of anyone. But now, raw, broken wails tore through her as fear, anger, and despair clawed their way to the surface. Each sob was a painful reminder of how far she had fallen. Through her tear-blurred vision, footsteps echoed against the cold pavement. She looked up, struggling to focus on the approaching figures. Gregory and Margaret. Lucas's parents. Their somber faces reflected the ruins of what had once been their family's legacy. Margaret reached her first. She knelt beside Vanessa, wrapping her arms around her in a futile attempt at comfort. She didn't speak, just held her. Vanessa clung to her, trembling, the weight of everything pressing down too hard, too fast. Gregory stood a few feet away, staring at the repossession notice nailed to the door. His lined face, once strong and assured, now looked hollow. Lucas, he muttered bitterly. How could he let this happen? The words hung heavy in the air, an accusation aimed as much at himself as his absent son. Margaret sniffled, wiping at her eyes before looking up at her husband. We need to find Lucas, she said shakily. We need answers. Gregory nodded grimly and pulled out his phone. His fingers trembled as he dialed. The phone rang. And rang. Again, no answer. The phone buzzed in my hand. I glanced at the screen. Margaret. A name from a past I had buried long ago. Curious, I answered, my voice devoid of warmth. Ethan, she breathed, desperation thick in her tone. I need your help. I stayed silent, letting her squirm. Lucas is missing. The bank, she choked back a sob. The bank has taken everything. The house, the cars, her voice cracked. He's not answering his phone. I don't know what's happening. I let the silence stretch, savoring it. Then I spoke, my voice cold and sharp. You really think I care? A sharp inhale on the other end. I could picture her scrambling, trying to find the right words, trying to regain control. You think I give a damn about your golden boy? I continued, my voice cutting through her panic like a blade. Or about our so-called family, who only saw me when it was convenient? Ethan, please, she whispered. We've lost everything. And you, she hesitated, voice breaking. You've taken everything from us. A bitter laugh escaped before I could stop it. Taken everything? I repeated, my voice rising with anger. No, Margaret. You lost everything the day you decided I didn't matter. The day you chose Lucas over me. The day you all betrayed me. I couldn't stop the words pouring out, years of resentment bubbling to the surface, unchecked and unstoppable. Do you even understand what that did to me? I demanded. You and Lucas. Not once did you care. I walked away, disappeared, and not one of you asked why. Not one of you wondered if I was dead or alive. Her silence was deafening. You were too busy worshipping Lucas, I spat, my voice shaking with barely suppressed fury. Your perfect, faultless son. A hitched breath. The faintest sound of a stifled sob. Good. Let her feel it. Just a fraction of what I carried for years. And what did he do with your devotion? I pressed. He tore me apart. Piece by piece. He stole my wife, my life, my future. And you? You just stood there. You let it happen. Margaret's breath trembled on the line, but I wasn't finished. You didn't even try, I said, voice dropping, venomous and unforgiving. You watched me walk away and never looked back. I was nothing to you. The silence stretched between us, thick with regret she would never be able to erase. And now, I exhaled sharply. Your perfect little world is crumbling, and you want me to fix it? Your house, your money, your precious lifestyle, all gone because of the son you put on a pedestal. The same son who destroyed me. And now he's destroyed you too. Ethan. Her voice was barely a whisper, broken and pleading. Don't, I snapped. Don't beg me. Don't pretend now that you care. I leaned forward, gripping the phone tighter, my voice low and seething. Where was this desperation when I needed you? I demanded. When I was drowning? When I had nothing? A bitter laugh escaped me, hollow and sharp. You didn't care then. And you don't care now. You just want me to save you from the mess you created. I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound that echoed in the silence. But guess what, Margaret? I don't need you. Not anymore. While you were busy pretending everything was fine, I was out there, rebuilding my life from the ashes of what you all destroyed. Brick by brick, I built something stronger. And now, I let out a slow exhale, my voice sharp as steel. Now, I get to watch it all come crashing down around you. Ethan, she whispered, her voice trembling with raw emotion. We're family. Please, don't do this. Family. I repeated, the word dripping with disdain. You and Dad destroyed that a long time ago. She sucked in a breath, but I didn't let her speak. You want someone to fix this? My tone turned mocking. Call your golden boy. Let Lucas clean up the mess he made. He's all you ever cared about anyway. Silence stretched between us. I could picture her now standing there, clutching the phone, pale, desperate. The image should have softened me. It didn't. It was too little. Too late. Good luck, Margaret, I said, my voice quiet but firm. You're going to need it. And then, I ended the call. The silence that followed? I welcomed it. For the first time in years, I had said everything that needed to be said. There was no going back. No redemption. Not for her. Not for them. A week later, the news came. Lucas was dead. Word spread fast, as it always does with tragedies like his. But the details? Predictable. They found him out in the desert, sprawled face down on the cracked, sun-scorched earth. Alone. Somehow, it felt fitting. A man who had spent his entire life basking in admiration, only to realize that when the applause stopped, no one was left to stand by his side. Next to him was an empty bottle, its label faded and peeling under the relentless sun. The coroner called it an overdose. A tragic end to a tragic life, they said. But I knew better. Lucas didn't stumble into tragedy. He embraced it. He toyed with it, teased it, until it finally consumed him. I could picture it, the panic setting in as he realized the world had moved on. No savior was coming. No one cared anymore. The pedestal he had clung to for so long was gone, and with it, the illusion of his invincibility. Meanwhile, back home, my parents' downfall was just as inevitable. The once magnificent house they had flaunted like a trophy? Gone. Replaced by a rotting husk on the outskirts of town. I drove by once, morbid curiosity getting the better of me. The windows were boarded up with warped plywood. The yard? Overgrown and wild. The paint peeled off the walls in long, jagged strips. It wasn't just a house, it was a reflection of their pride. Shattered. Abandoned. Crushed under the weight of their own arrogance. I didn't stop the car. I didn't need to. The image was burned into my memory. They had placed their faith in a lie, and when it fell apart, they were left with nothing but memories of their delusions. And Lucas? Lucas was dust in the wind. And then, there was Vanessa. The woman who once ruled Lucas' world with a dazzling smile and a look that could silence a room. Now, she worked in a seedy dive bar on the edge of town, pouring drinks for men who didn't even pretend to respect her. One night, I decided to see for myself. I sat in the corner, unnoticed, watching her. The years hadn't been kind. The glow she once wore like armor was gone, replaced by a weary, hollow expression that couldn't hide the weight of defeat. The men at the bar jeered at her, made crass jokes, laughed at her expense. And she took it. She smiled, played along because what else could she do? This bar, with its dim lighting and stale beer, was her life now. A far cry from the luxury she had once flaunted as Lucas's wife. I should have felt something. Pity, sadness, maybe even regret. But all I remembered was the way she used to look at me, like I was beneath her. I remembered her disdain, her mocking laughter when I walked away, convinced I would never amount to anything without them. Now look at her. Now look at all of them. Lucas is dead. My parents are prisoners of their own failures. And Vanessa? She's a ghost of herself, clinging to the scraps of a world that no longer wants her. And me? I'm still here. Stronger. Unshackled. They thought they could destroy me, but all they did was sharpen my resolve. This isn't vengeance. It's balance. Vanessa must have hoped for a second chance. Maybe she thought some miracle would lift her out of the wreckage. But hope didn't live in that bar. It died there, night after night, as she endured the sneers, the drunken laughter, the mockery of men who saw her as nothing. She endured because she had no choice. There was nowhere else for her to go. The life she had once boasted about was gone, and with it, the illusion of her untouchable privilege. And the kids? There was no contest. I filed for full custody, and the judge barely needed convincing. Vanessa had no stable home, no real income, and no ability to provide for them. All she had to offer was chaos. The court saw it as clearly as I did. And the kids? They were relieved. They had seen what I went through for them, how hard I had fought to give them a better life. They didn't expect me to be perfect. They just needed someone who truly cared. And when they moved in, I made sure they felt it. My home became theirs, a place where they were safe, where they were valued. I didn't spoil them to buy their love. I gave them what they had been denied for so long. Stability, respect, love. Slowly, they began to heal. Their laughter came easier. Their confidence grew. And for the first time in a long, long time, we were finally free. They joined clubs, picked up hobbies, started dreaming again. Watching them thrive was all the validation I needed. In the end, I wasn't seeking revenge. I was seeking justice. And I got it. I won't deny that I had been angry at Vanessa, at Lucas, at my parents, for everything they had done, for the chaos they created. But that anger? It didn't control me anymore. It wasn't what drove me forward. My focus had shifted to my children, to their future, to creating the stability and love they had been missing for far too long. Vanessa may have lost everything, but I gained something far more valuable than wealth or power. A chance to give my children a life where they felt safe, loved, and hopeful. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Vanessa had always been headstrong, carrying herself like the world owed her something. Even after everything fell apart, that fire inside her didn't die. It just burned her more than anyone else. I'd heard the stories. She was working in a rundown bar, scraping by on tips. Sometimes, I almost pitied her. Almost. But her choices led her there. And I had no intention of letting her chaos pull me back into her orbit. One afternoon, Sierra and I were at our favorite little cafe downtown. It wasn't anything fancy, just a cozy place where we could escape the noise of the world for a while. I remember her laughter that day, bright, carefree, the kind that made everything else fade away. For the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe, like I had truly left all the bitterness behind. And then, I saw Vanessa. She was across the street, and before I could even process the look in her eyes, she was storming toward us. Her heels clicked against the pavement like a countdown, each step charged with tension. Her face was etched in fury. Her eyes locked onto me, a mix of rage and desperation burning behind them. "Ethan," she shouted, her voice sharp enough to cut through the soft hum of the cafe. Heads turned. For a moment, the whole place seemed to freeze. "How dare you move on like this?" Her voice was shaking, rising in anger and disbelief. "You think you can just forget everything? Forget me? Forget your family?" I set my coffee down, meeting her gaze with a calm I didn't entirely feel. "Vanessa," I said evenly, "this isn't the place for this. I've moved on. You should too." But she wasn't looking for reason. Her hands trembled as she stepped closer, face twisted in rage and resentment. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" she spat. "You took everything from me, everything." I felt Sierra shift beside me, her posture stiffening as she prepared for whatever was about to happen. Before I could respond, Vanessa lunged, her hand raised, aiming to slap me. She never got the chance. Sierra was on her feet in an instant. She stepped between us with calm precision, a presence both protective and commanding. Her voice was low and controlled, like steel wrapped in silk. "That's enough." Vanessa froze, her hand still hovering midair. Stunned, but not for long. Her lips twisted into a sneer. "Who do you think you are?" she hissed. "You don't know anything about us, about him, about what he's done." Sierra didn't flinch. "I know enough," she replied, her voice steady. "I know he's moved on. And you should too." Vanessa's venom deepened. She lunged again, this time aiming to shove Sierra. It was a mistake. In one fluid motion, Sierra sidestepped and caught Vanessa's wrist. Before anyone could react, Vanessa was on the ground, her arm pinned behind her back. Precise, practiced, controlled. Sierra wasn't reacting. She was protecting. The cafe erupted into gasps and murmurs. Sierra held Vanessa firmly, but without unnecessary force. Her voice was calm, but carried an unmistakable edge. "I'm showing you mercy," she said quietly. "Don't make me regret it." Vanessa stopped struggling. The anger drained from her face, replaced by shock and humiliation. When Sierra finally released her, she staggered to her feet, clutching her wrist. For a moment, she just stood there, glaring at Sierra with a mix of fury and shame. Then, without another word, she turned and stumbled away. I exhaled slowly, rising to my feet. "You didn't have to do that," I said softly. Sierra's gaze met mine. "Yes, I did," she said. "No one threatens you. Not her. Not anyone." But Vanessa? She wasn't done. She stormed into the police station, spinning a pathetic tale about being attacked without provocation. She played the victim, her tears painting a picture of a defenseless woman, wronged by someone out of control. She demanded justice, clinging to the belief that the system would bend to her will. Her story fell apart the moment the cafe's security footage came into play. The video showed it all. Vanessa storming toward me, her rage escalating, trying to slap me, then turning her fury on Sierra. The recording showed Sierra's actions as calm, controlled, entirely in self-defense. A sharp contrast to Vanessa's reckless aggression. In court, the judge watched the footage with an unwavering gaze. Then, their voice cut through the room. "The video is clear," they said. "You were the aggressor." Vanessa flinched. Sierra's actions were not only justified but measured under the circumstances. A sharp crack of the gavel silenced the courtroom. "This case is dismissed." Final. Undeniable. The judge's gaze hardened as they turned to Vanessa. "Miss Vanessa Hayes," they began, their voice heavy with reproach. "Your conduct has been nothing short of disgraceful. The evidence does not support your claims of victimhood." Vanessa sat there, speechless. And as the last shreds of her delusion crumbled, I realized something. She wasn't just fighting Sierra. She was fighting reality itself. And losing. The judge's voice rang through the courtroom, cold and absolute. "Instead, this reveals a troubling pattern of hostility and vindictiveness. This is not the behavior of someone seeking justice. This is the behavior of someone intent on causing harm." Vanessa flinched, her confidence crumbling under the weight of the judge's words. "Let me be clear," they continued. "Any further attempts to contact or confront Mr. Ethan Caldwell, his fiancée Sierra, or their children will not be tolerated." The tension in the room thickened. "You are hereby ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from them at all times. This restraining order is effective immediately and will remain in place indefinitely. Any violation will result in severe legal consequences." The gavel struck. Final. Unforgiving. Absolute. The only sound in the courtroom was the rhythmic tapping of the stenographer's keys. Vanessa's cheeks burned as she stared at the floor, the murmurs of the onlookers adding to her humiliation. Every eye in the room was on her. Each gaze was a reflection of her downfall. Once admired, once envied. Now, a woman stripped of dignity, exposed for what she had become. The bitterness that once fueled her had only served to consume her instead. Her desperate attempts to disrupt my life had only highlighted her descent. She had lost, and the world knew it. The gavel struck again, ending the hearing. Vanessa rose from her seat, her movements slow, deliberate, as though each step carried the weight of her disgrace. She avoided eye contact as she exited the courtroom, her head bowed, pride shattered. For the first time, the consequences of her actions fully registered. She was alone, abandoned by the very people she had once manipulated, isolated by her own choices. There was no one left to blame but herself. Sierra, meanwhile, stood tall and composed, her name cleared, her integrity intact. As we walked out of the courtroom together, I slipped my arm around her shoulders. "That was a lot." I exhaled, shaking off the tension. Sierra smiled softly, her confidence steady as ever. "She needed to learn that actions have consequences," she said simply. Sierra had become the anchor in my life, the unshakable force that stood by my side. And when we exchanged vows in a small, intimate ceremony surrounded by close friends and family. It felt like the culmination of everything we had fought for. Love, healing, renewal. It wasn't just about starting over. It was about building a life on my own terms, free from the chaos of the past. Sierra embraced her role in our family wholeheartedly. With her background in martial arts, she started teaching the kids, not just self-defense, but discipline, confidence, and resilience. What started as casual lessons quickly became a cherished routine. She taught them far more than physical skills. She instilled in them values of integrity, perseverance, and strength. Under her guidance, the kids flourished. Their laughter grew louder. Their spirits grew lighter. Their dreams became bolder. Sierra's influence became a cornerstone of their growth, helping them rebuild their sense of self and purpose. Watching them thrive filled me with a deep gratitude I could hardly put into words. For the first time in years, my life felt whole, filled with love, stability, and the promise of a brighter future. Together, Sierra and I created a home where the kids felt safe and cherished, a stark contrast to the turbulence they had endured before. And Vanessa? She faded into the shadows of her own making. Once vibrant, once powerful, now just a ghost of herself. A woman who once thrived on attention reduced to nothing but regret and loneliness. Isolated, forgotten, she watched from a distance as my family and I moved forward. Our happiness became a painful reminder of everything she had lost. Every choice she had made, every bridge she had burned, had led her to this empty place. She sat alone in her small apartment, staring at the walls, realizing she was no longer the center of anyone's world, no longer admired, no longer envied, no longer relevant. But I didn't dwell on Vanessa's fate. I refused to let the past define me. With Sierra by my side, I focused on building a life rooted in love, resilience, and joy. Together, we became partners in every sense, shaping a family and a future built on strength. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. And that was the real victory. The past, with all its betrayals, heartbreaks, and lessons, now felt like a distant storm. A storm that had once battered me relentlessly, but ultimately passed, leaving the skies clear and calm. The scars remained, of course. They always do. But instead of bitterness, they carried a quiet strength, a testament to what I had endured, and to what I had built from the ashes. In my workshop, surrounded by the tools of my trade, the hum of creation filled the air. It was a comforting sound, a reminder of who I am. A builder, a creator, a survivor. Across the room, Sierra laughed, her voice light and joyous as the kids animatedly recounted their day. The sight made me pause. A warm sense of contentment washed over me. This is my life now. Simple, authentic, full of love. The echoes of Vanessa, Lucas, and my family's betrayal still lingered faintly, like distant thunder, but they no longer carried the power to haunt me. They were just reminders, markers of a past that shaped me, but no longer defined me. I used to think revenge would heal me, that seeing their downfall would bring me peace. But the truth? My peace didn't come from their failures. It came from letting go. It came from building something new, something entirely mine. Sierra, with her steadfast strength and unwavering love, had become the cornerstone of this new life. She didn't just stand beside me. She stood with me, lifting me up, grounding me when the world felt unsteady. And the kids? They flourished. Their laughter was louder. Their smiles were brighter. Their dreams? Bigger than ever before. Together, we created a home where they felt safe, valued, and loved. A stark contrast to the turbulence they once knew. And as I watched them, I realized something. The greatest victory wasn't in seeing those who wronged me fall. It was in knowing I had created a life they could never take away. A life rooted in love, resilience, and hope. This was my legacy. Not one of bitterness or revenge, but one of growth, strength, and unwavering truth. And so I live, not just surviving, but thriving. With Sierra and the kids by my side, we built a sanctuary, a place where the past holds no power. And the future? Bright with promise. For the first time in years, I feel whole. And in that quiet contentment, I finally understand what it means to be free.